This is basically your bench setup for preparation for your getting ready to do some tattooing. You have your ultrasonic directly in front of you, which will have a cup in with water for rinsing out your machines. Your colors are within reach, and you should lay your colors out ahead of time. Your bandages within plain reach. Your gloves should be directly in front of you, so after you scrub down from your sink, you walk down, you put your gloves on, grab your instruments, you'll be ready to assemble and go to work. If you're looking to your right, as I'm sitting in front of the bench, you have your sharps container for disposal of your needles that you used on your customer. So your customer goes home with a good feeling that you used new needles on him. That's a very important part. Okay, now we're going to get prepared to do some setup work, but we need to do a scrub down first. I'm going to wash my hands, and most health departments require a special type handle on your sinks. They're called strikers because they don't allow you to touch the sinks. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to scrub down, and it's very important to get into the cuticle areas and the webbing parts of the fingers because that's where most of your bacteria and your germs are going to lie. We'll get that done first, and they generally require you to scrub for about 30 seconds to a minute to make sure you get in between everything. As soon as you're done with the scrubbing process, okay, you want to go over and you want to make sure you put your gloves on immediately so you don't contaminate anything on your bench, because your bench has been prepared ahead of time here. And we're going to place these on. If you look on the bench here, we have a disposable cap holder. And there's several caps here. Even though we're going to do just primarily black work and black washout work, the health department regulations state that once you fill a cap, you cannot go back in and refill it because it is called cross-contamination, and that we want to avoid at all cost. Over here we have autoclave bags. All the instruments have been autoclaved. Depending on what type you use, you'll have to check your colorations on the back to make sure they are sterile beforehand. We're going to cut them open and we're going to place them in the machines and let you see how we're doing that. This needle that I just took out of the autoclave bag, that is a 7 needle round liner and a 5 needle square tip liner tube. That's the type of needle we're going to be outlining with for this design. The other tubing that we've just taken out is a 4 needle flat shader tube with a 4 needle flat shader bar itself. They work very well for this type of design. It allows you to get into tight spots. Okay, now we're going to place the needle bar into the tube very, very carefully because you want to make sure that you don't bump the tips of the needle. The loop itself should face to your left to make sure when it goes down into the tip that it goes in the correct place. Put your finger on the back of the bar, which will keep it secure inside the tube so it doesn't flop around and possibly damage the needle. It will enable you to put the tube in the machine and still be in control. Okay, we're going to set up the tube in the machine now. We want to make sure that we place our finger on the back side of the bar against the tube so we don't get any play in the tube, taking a chance of damaging the needle. Always hold the machine towards you so you can see exactly what you're doing. If you watch my fingers, on my left hand, it's going behind the machine here because I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on the machine between my forefinger and my thumb. And my 2 fingers here are keeping the tube in place. I'm going to place the needle bar on, making sure that the needle bar is snug against the grommet, because if there's play between the grommet and the bar, there will be splashing and puddles on the skin that you don't want. I'm going to do an adjustment on the tube in 1 second. I'm going to put the rubber bands down first. Very important to get your rubber bands in place it's important to make sure they're nice and even coming across. If you've got your bands twisted here, it will cause a different tension against the bar itself. So get them on nice and smooth. You're going to do the adjustment on the tube and the needle bar now. I'm going to place this against the paper so you can see that the end of the needle bar is just going to be sticking out at the end of the tip. I'm going to bring it up. Snug it down, not tight, because you may have to readjust this again to make sure that your tube is straight. We're going to take the machine. We're going to tip the machine this way. If you look at the tube in relation to the machine, you have to make sure it's straight this way, so your tip in your tube is not angled. Now we're going to adjust the needle bar to the tube tip itself. You'll need your number 5 eye loop. If you watch the needle, it has to ride directly in the bottom of the tip. If it does not, it will cause a splashing in the machine, and you'll be very unhappy when you're doing your line work that you can't see where you're going. Now we're going to set up your 4-needle shader. Your 4-needle shader is 4 needles that will fit into this square tip here, which will allow you to get into very tight areas and still cover a relatively large area of skin. Placing into the machine. Onto the armature bar. Snug. No play. Placing the rubber bands evenly. Okay, we have our needle bar into the tube. Now it's very important to make sure that you don't have too much needle sticking out the end of the tube tip itself, because if it does, it will hang up in the skin and cause skin damage. If you look very closely, there's a tiny, tiny bit of needle sticking out the end of the tube tip itself. Now we're going to adjust the needle to the bottom of the tube tip itself. It's very important that it sits flat. If it does not sit flat, it will not feed properly, and you will end up with big puddles on the skin. So we're going to look down inside, making sure the needle is flat in the bottom of the tube tip. Okay, then we snug our machine down. I want to point out a very important part here. If you look at the way I'm holding the machine, thumb, finger to the back of the machine, I never touch that front spring. You never want to touch that. We're all ready? Set to do some work.